We're so excited to have with us this morning Miss Verena Jonas, who is the founder and CEO of Greater Heights Counseling. Her goal in her current work is to add value to others by assisting early child development programs such as Head Start and Early Head Start with solving complex problems. Additionally, she seeks to contribute to the advancement of high quality, comprehensive care and services for children, families, and early childhood programs. She has over 25 years of experience working in early childhood education. She completed 4 years of active duty in the United States Marine Corps, and then she decided she was most passionate about young children and their families. So she began her career as an infant toddler teacher with the Department of Defense Child Development Center on board the USMC New River Station. 3 years later, she joined the team at previously known as now Onslow County Partnership for Children, a large nonprofit child and family serving organization. She served in various capacities during that 18-year tenure. And then before devoting her work full-time to GHC, she served as the Early Head Start Director at OCPC. In her role, she was charged with providing overall leadership and administration of the Early Head Start programs. And during her leadership as the director, she made significant contributions which positively impacted children, families, staff, and the community. And we have a wonderful asset with us this morning to share about child development in times of crisis. Just a little background, and to people on the call who will absolutely recognize this name when I say she came highly, highly, highly recommended from Miss Patricia Beyer, who I know many of you work with as another leader within the Head Start space. So we are in capable hands this morning. I'm excited to hear from her. Also, just as a note, since she is a veteran, remember, tomorrow we will be off. We will pause our programming tomorrow for Veterans Day to thank a veteran. So you can thank Ms. Verena Jonas in the comments for her service, and we will enjoy what she shares with us this morning. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Ms. Verena Jonas. Verena?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our time together. I am super excited to be here with you today, and I am just looking forward. I think I have a content-packed, content-rich. I hope we have enough time, but I was just super excited, and I was thinking about talking to you guys and sharing with you guys even all night, actually changing slides and getting super excited about things. And I see the chat lighting up and folks saying thank you for your service, and it was my honor to serve, and it's still my honor to continue to serve in the capacity that I do now, just as you are providing services. So before I jump into the presentation, I wanted to know who's all in the space. I was going to say who's in the room, but obviously this is virtual, so who all is in the virtual space? So tell me your position and the length of time you've done your work. And I'll try to look in the chat so I can see, because I always like to know the wealth of experience that we're looking at and working when we're presenting and working with other people. I always like to know the wealth of experience that's coming from the group, the audience. Yes, I see all the thank you for your service. I appreciate you guys. All right, Tiffany, 2.5 years. I'm trying to keep up, guys. Over 10 years. This is Tanya, 36 years. And I know Tanya Dennis. All right. So yes, so far a wealth of experience is coming through. 12 years, case manager for 10 years, 6 years. All right, 30 years. All right, way to go. Thank you guys for your service. That is awesome. Angeline Roberts says 4 years. Yeah, very, very good. So thank you guys for your willingness to share that with me. And we're going to talk a little bit about child development in times of crisis today. As you know, the COVID pandemic, has given rise to a wide array of factors, right, that threaten babies and toddlers, their chances at a healthy start in life. So specifically, there are increases in child and family emotional distress, right? Disruption in preventative care, and increases in food insecurity. And these all three things really have a tremendous impact, or can potentially have a tremendous impact on children's development over a period of time. So next slide, please. I am hopeful that this information, what I share today with you, would be of value to you, regardless of, how you serve, what your role is in your work, whether or not you work directly with children and families or not. I'm pretty sure you have children of your own, and nieces and nephews, the young people in your life for whom you have influence. So I'm hopeful that this will be beneficial to you. We're going to explore a few things here today: the significance of play in children's learning and development, the importance of the brain in young children's development. We're going to talk a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in relation to children's development, the impact of COVID-19 on children's learning and development, and I want to share some Head Start. Head Start really did a phenomenal job of coming along and providing support, timely support, for the programs, children and families that we served during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what's a presentation without some resources? So I want to share with you some specific resources on resilience, because we obviously will not have time to tap into any of that today, and resources for further reading from reputable places that you should get information from about early child development. So if you can give me the next slide, please. All right, so I have a little opening exercise that I'd like to engage you in this morning. So did you engage in remote learning with your child or children during the height of COVID-19? What is one word that would describe your total experience? And what do you appreciate most about the process? So if you can, in the chat room, just put number 1 and your response number 2, your response number 3, your response. And then that will give us an idea of, it's going to segue us into our discussion. All right, so I see some folks says yes, they did have to engage in virtual remote learning with their children. What about a word that describes your overwhelming at times? Okay. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Frustrating? I'm with you there. I'm right along with you on that one. Aggravating. This is real talk, guys. It's okay. Share exactly how you feel. Different and challenging. Challenging. So yes, I had some of the same sentiments. Patient, good. I did gain a lot of patience from the process. That's for sure. Yes. Fragmented between agencies, hopeful. All right. So time spent with my daughter, yes. Chaotic, disorganized, eye-opening. I appreciate the resilience children show when they have to adapt. So these are all fantastic. Chaotic, chaos. The extra time with my youngest child, I guess that's what you would say that you, for number 3, that you appreciated the most. Yes. Awesome. Awesome. So yes, I have a little guy who every time I wasn't looking, he was minimizing the teacher, and he was actually playing video games. So Lord, it was hard. It was a hard thing. But we managed, like somebody said, resilience is key, and we got through it. So I thank you guys for taking the time. And I think one of the things that I appreciated most, Cassandra just said, I appreciate the patience and communication that the teachers have. And that's one of the things that came out of this for me. I had a new appreciation, an even greater appreciation for educators. Obviously I appreciated my children's teacher, and I always have a special spot for early childhood professionals and educators, but the school system, I really, really appreciated all of what my children's teachers try to do during this time. So thank you guys for engaging with me in this activity. I think I've gotten the majority of the responses, and if you can move me to the next slide, that would be great. So, okay, I have to keep track of the time. All right, so we can't really talk about children's development really without talking about play, because play is work for a child. And here, from a child's perspective, it says, when you ask me what I did in school today and I say I just played, please don't misunderstand me, for you see, I am learning as I play. I am learning to enjoy and be successful in my work. Today, I am a child and my work is play. And I love this little play is the highest form of research, that quote here. So it's clear from all of the research and expert advice that learning through play builds lifelong learners, and it also supports children's optimal development, right? So we know play when we see it, whether it's happening on the playground, whether it's happening at home, in the classroom, we can identify play. Oh, it plays universal. It happens with children from every culture, economic background, community. Play is children engage in play very, very early in life, right? Even with places where there is deprivation and danger, you will find that children play as well. And so play, I just thought this little fun fact here for you. Play is so important to optimal child development that it has been recognized by the United Nations High Commissions for Human Rights as a right of every child. I thought that was really, really cool and very important. So I'm not going to really linger on play. There are different categories of play. In play, obviously, children, they learn how to persist. They learn how to interact, how to invent, how to create, how to share ideas. They also learn how to develop a dispensation for lifelong learning, like I mentioned. They learn how to seek out knowledge, explore, discover new things, make friends, practice skills, improve social skills, and most of all, have fun while they're doing all that. I just thought it's interesting, even with children that are experiencing toxic stress, play is helpful, and even many therapies has a involved an element of play in it as well. So I just wanted to share that. Next slide, please. So play really is serious work for children. We're going to explore the developmental domains just briefly, to review the skills that young children are working on mastering as they play. And then during play, again, they're learning very, very important skills that's going to prepare them for school and for life. I wanted to give you this visual right here that just highlights at a glance some of the areas. If you're not, if child development is not your background, I figured that would be helpful just at a glance. We will talk about each area briefly, but at a glance, look at the amount of work that children are doing when they play, in the physical domain, what they're doing, in social development, what you can expect. And then cognitive development, which is aligned with their thinking, their level of intelligence, perception. This is the work that's happening here for them. And then, of course, emotional development, social emotional development, which we'll talk more about. Next slide, please. Why do the early years matter so much? What is all the fuss about that? Children have 2,000 days from birth until they begin kindergarten, right? 2,000 days. So during those early years, we have a unique opportunity to partner with families, right, to help children and to help promote optimal child development. So scientific research, over the past 30 years has really taught us that the most important period of human development is from birth to age 8. During those years, the development of cognitive skills, emotional well-being, social competence, and sound physical and mental health builds a strong foundation for success, well into the adult years. So with enough stimulation, a child's brain forms neural connections at a ridiculously high speed, right? These connections are triggered by rich, loving and protected environments in the context of responsive and playful caregiving. That fosters bonding and secure attachments with children. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you this visual here. The next thing we're going to watch is a short video on explanation of brain development and how it works. I thought it would be helpful and useful. But just looking at this visual here, I want to pull out two key ingredients that the brain needs to be healthy. For healthy development, and it's going to be a theme throughout this presentation. Okay, I try to highlight it everywhere that it's you'll see it's bolded. But good nutrition and loving, consistent caregiving for social emotional development and competence. These are the things that are really, really necessary to help young children grow and develop. So as you can see here about brain development, and let's look at the nutrition part. 60% of an infant's energy intake is from the food that they use, that the food is used for brain growth, right? So 60%. And then as you look at the toddler, I don't know, I'm not sure if you guys can really see the slide because it's a little bit small, the writing. But you can see by age 2, the brain reaches about 75% of an adult weight, and they have 100 trillion cells connected, right, called synapses at age 2. And so this is pretty powerful information that by the age 2, the children have that many brain connections, and by age 10, I believe, if those connections are not well connected, then it begins to prune itself. It's called use it or lose it. So we really want to take every opportunity to help children develop to their optimal potential. So as you can see there, when you look at the nutrition part, it tells you what nutritional qualities are necessary for children's brain development at various stages. And you can see here that omega-3 fatty acid is definitely an essential critical building block in brain development for a young toddler. And then children, calcium and vitamin D, which promotes calcium absorption, helps strengthen bones and teeth. So all these things are happening. And I also wanted to show about social emotional development, that by age 1, infants typically understand about 70 words, but speak only a handful of them. And by toddlerhood, they become increasingly independent, and they're interested in new things. And they add more words, 1 new word every 2 waking hours. And also an older toddler is able to have a vocabulary of at least 300 words, and they're constantly putting words together. Now, I'm giving this little background for a reason, because when we talk about toxic stress and the impact it can have on development, right, on the impact they have on development, then we can see what can be lost for children if they're not nurtured and if they're not buffered and protected from that toxic stress. So Tanya says, let's see. Okay, I'm just trying to check the chat. By the time they exit EHS or enter Head Start, the foundation for social, emotional, workforce-ready skills are laid. Freaking amazing. And I agree with you 100%. Those soft skills that employers are looking for, that so many people, I believe I read a statistic that said about 98% did not have, the foundation for that begins now. So that's how important this time of development is. Next slide, please. All right, let's just to give you a little background. This video, I'm sure anybody child development background will be able to recognize this voice. So this is the founding director, Jack Shonkoff, of the Center on the Developing Child, Harvard. University. I use a lot of his research, a lot of his work, because it's easy to understand. He takes the brain science and he makes it where, a layperson can understand it. And so I find it very helpful. And their mission at the Development Center on Developing Child is to drive science-based innovation that achieves breakthrough outcomes for children facing adversity. So if you can go ahead and play that, we can listen.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay. So this is a good time to pause and see if anybody had any questions or any comments. Feel free to use the chat and share your thoughts or comments as we proceed, because the next slide we're going to jump into the child development domains. And so I wanted to pause and see if anybody had any comments, questions that they'd like to share at this time. You can move me to the next slide. Okay, so someone said, Marsha Wright says, I agree. What is so concerning to me is that once these children spend about 3 or 4 years in traditional schools after exiting Head Start, those tools and skills have been devalued and taught out of children, especially kids of color, and the struggle to have success really begins. So there is some concern and some work that I think is in progress that's being done about making sure those transitions happen and making sure that there's connectivity between those early learning programs and the school system. So there's work being done on that, and the hope is that there will be a smooth transition, and that there are things like, for example, Head Start is so comprehensive in nature. There are family services support. There's all kinds of support that families receive when they're in the Head Start setting that's quite different than the school system. So I hear your sentiment on that. But I want to encourage that there is work and progress being done in those areas. So let's look at child development. And I threw up a tool up there that I'm familiar with, that I'm used to. I use it all the time. In fact, it's referenced throughout my presentation here. So the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes Framework, obviously it's a tool that has been heavily researched, and also that it's a tool that really aligns well with different curriculums in early childhood, as well as different child assessment tools. So it really is a continuum of learning for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And I'll just define briefly how it works. So birth through 9 months is considered infant for the purpose of this work and this tool. Toddlers 8 to 18 months, and then 16 to 36 months, and preschoolers is 3 to 5. All right. So these different areas: approaches to learning, cognitive, motor, perceptual, motor, and physical, language and literacy, and social emotional development, or domains, are the areas that the large areas where there is going to be skills and goals that are outlined for children to do on that continuum. So there are things to be considered: children's cultural, their own temperament, their own learning style, their personality, whether or not they have special needs, and all of this needs to be taken into account when you're actually working with children and kind of trying to figure out where they're at on the continuum. So if you will go to the next slide for me, please. All right, so approaches to learning. This one is a little bit different than the others because it focuses on how children learn, not what they learn, but rather how they learn, right? So the approaches to learning, it refers to their learning styles, habits, motivations, attitudes, that really shows how children involve themselves in learning and how they go about developing new skills and new concepts. These approaches are influenced, again, like I said, by, it could be their gender, the temperament. Some kids will be really standoffish, they'll be observant, while other kids will jump in and play right away, by attitudes and expectations from maybe their culture, their family, their communities. And so there are a lot of things to be taken into consideration. But I'll just touch on a couple of those that are listed here. So cognitive self-regulation, what is that? And children, it's referred to as executive functioning, right? That's the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that is responsible for making good decisions, sustaining attention, having good impulse control, and flexibility in thinking. Imagine your teenagers, right? The teenagers, you might think, okay, you told them to go clean their room and they threw all the dirty clothes underneath the bed. And then, so the executive functioning is not fully developed until about age 25 or so. So you pretty much have to still break things down for especially young children. But all of what we do in the classrooms and even at home can help children to develop executive functioning. So what these skills are necessary for life and for school. So learning how to read and apply what you learn, that's your working memory. Completing a list of chores, cooking, working in groups, asking for help when you need help. That's the self-control part. Flexibility in thinking is being able to look at things from different perspectives, which is difficult because a lot of adults can't even do that. And being able to problem solve. So definitely the cognitive self-regulation piece, I wanted to go over it. And really, really what I want to share here is that children can learn this in the context of a healthy, consistent, supportive relationship with adults who can really model these, how to attain those skills for children, right? So what is self-regulation anyways, right? It's understanding your feelings, being able to manage those feelings, not really falling apart, being able to hold it together, getting along with others, making friends, being socially, behaving in socially accepted ways, and really being ready to learn. Kindergarten teachers all over the nation will tell you that don't worry so much about teaching the children the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Focus on making sure that they work on some of these self-regulation skills, which is a difficult task. All of what infants and toddlers and preschoolers have to do, and young school-age children, it takes an enormous amount of effort and energy. I'm going to check the chat. I see it light up. Okay. Yeah, there are some people have some passionate feelings about the point that was brought up earlier with Head Start in the school system. Yes. Yes, we are learning to be a part of the village. I agree with that. So so I wanted to mention, so the two that I talked about here is flexibility in thinking, self-regulation, and cognitive self-regulation. Can you move me to the next slide? Because I really don't want to spend a lot of time on those. I just want to be able to give you a brief little overview on them. Cognitive development, again, it's about reasoning, memory, problem solving, and your thinking skills, right? Helping children to be able to organize their world. Right. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about: math development, mathematics, emerging mathematics thinking. So with young children, they are getting exposure to math early, and a lot of parents don't really know that. But when they're all of those materials that they play with and they're interacting with teaches them about math. So they learn about numbers and quantities, their relationships and operations, such as what it means to add and take away, right? They also learn about shapes and the different structures. They learn about how to measure things, how to classify things, and how to develop patterns. They really, really like to engage in activities with like cooking things and where they have to measure different things. And so making Play-Doh and all of that. So all of those different things give them an opportunity to understand relationships and how things work, right? They learn about cause and effect. Even a very young baby learn about cause and effect in the very beginning. If I cry, someone who's loving and responsive will attend to my needs. And then later, it's those peekaboo toys. If I press on this, then it makes music. And then that goes on a preschooler sink and float activities. They can learn symbolic thinking, which is pretty much where they're actually learning that the importance of learning that words and numbers represent meaningful ideas. And sometimes in the block area, they'll be playing and you can see them using a block as a telephone or using something else for another intended purpose. So these are, can you give me the next slide, please? And so for the perceptual, motor, and physical domain, this domain right here is important because it sets the foundation for all of the other areas. Learning in all of the other areas, it permits children to fully explore and function in their environment, right? So gross motor skills, let's talk about that. The large muscles, it's moving, using the whole body and using larger muscles of the body, such as the arms and the legs. So in an infant, the gross motor skills include gaining control of the head, the neck, the torso to achieve with standing or sitting position. They include the locomotor skills that emerge in toddlerhood, such as walking, throwing, stretching, and preschoolers, they have even gained greater control over their bodies, and they're able to do things like coordinate movements as they learn how to ride a tricycle, and so on and so forth. So fine motor skills are the small muscles. It's found in the individual body parts, especially those in the hands and the feet. So even with a young child that's being able to take some Cheerios, some dry cereal or whatnot from the tray to put to their mouth, and they're using these fingers, this is really, really setting a foundation for writing skills later and being able to do self-help stuff like maybe buttoning, unzipping, zipping, tying your shoelaces and all that. So there's intention and purpose for everything and every activity that we do in early childhood to help children to become successful adults. Again, they use their fine motor skills to grasp, hold, manipulate small toys such as the cups, drinking cups, or use tools, including scissors and paint. And then another thing preschoolers start to gain is the hand and eye coordination to learn to direct the movements of their fingers, their hands, and the wrists to perform more complex tasks, including drawing fine details or stringing small beads. And children can practice these fine and gross motor skills at home, at school, just anywhere. During routines, while they're eating, while they're taking a bath, whatever the situation may be. And the physical well-being, it definitely is important. Children need to learn early about safety and about, letting us know when they're hungry, when they feel sick, we teach them things like how to use a toothbrush, and by preschool, how to put a pea-sized amount of toothpaste on the toothbrush, and so that they're learning those self-help skills for their physical well-being as well. Can we get the next slide? Oh, wait, I wanted to highlight right here where it says good health, safety, and nutrition, because I told you nutrition is going to come back. But first, health and safety, you have to have that anyway. When we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we'll talk about it then. But health and safety is like a given. You have to have that, or children really can't take risks. They can't learn. They won't feel safe to move forward in their own development. So nutrition is also one of the key factors. So next slide, please. Language. Let me see. I think someone said something. I saw a flash. Children need vocabulary words or tools to express how they feel so others can understand. Reading and writing and computation will follow. That's right. Talk to and with kids. Play with them. Put your phone down and focus and engage with them. Don't talk on your phone at Walmart. Show the colors, shape, pictures, foods. Those lessons are valuable, and it's free. And it's during a routine. If you have to be in the grocery store anyway, it doesn't take anything to do that. So thanks for sharing those ideas. So for language and literacy development, obviously language development, that refers to emerging abilities to listen and to understand. So your receptive language, and then they're also working on using language, so the expressive language. So in many cases, children their receptive language comes before some of the expressive language. And what I find is very fascinating, and you may already know this, is that babies attend to sounds of language in the environment before they're even born. So in the context of nurturing, responsive adult relationships, infants rapidly learn to communicate with facial expressions, gestures, and looks, right? So when a baby is born, when they're first born, within that first year of life, they have the ability to speak and to make any sounds for any language in the world. They have the ability and the capacity to do that. Within the 1 year, they will only be able to make those sounds for the languages that they hear more consistently. So the ability to do all languages of the world languages will fade away, and they'll only be able to do. So if a child has the ability to hear home language for 3 or 4 or 5 different languages, they can, from baby on up, they can actually learn to speak those languages even without an accent. I think that's fascinating. All right, so emergent literacy, kids, they'll draw pictures, they'll tell you about their pictures, they start to draw straight lines, they scribble. Everything children do, there's a purpose for it, and we have a place for it where we can kind of like align it with their development and where they're at that time. So I just wanted to share just a few little things about language and literacy. We have to be able to read to children at all times, again, during routine, bedtime routine. We can make up songs. We can also read to them all throughout the day. And I'll be vulnerable a little bit here. When I was in the classroom, and I was a toddler teacher, and the kids used to like this book called Brown Bear, What Do You See? And they wanted me to read it like 100 times a day. I'm confessing, I know this is recording, but I'm being vulnerable here. That's before I knew better, right? When you know better, you're supposed to do better. But before I knew better, I would hide the book sometimes because I was just so tired of reading it. But I had no idea that it wasn't until, that's why it's important that early educators, we are brain builders, and we have to go to school to get the knowledge and the experience and the context that we need to teach young children. And so, if they love the book, you continue to read it over and over and over. So I just wanted to share, again, the babies, they begin with the cooing and the babbling. And then, the toddlers learn to speak new words at an amazing pace and use to express their needs, ask questions, engage in short conversations. They acquire 1 new word every 2 waking hours. That's fascinating. And that's for children, again, whose parents and caregivers, right, are providing that responsive care For parents who may be concerned and consumed with where their next meal may come from, or how are they going to pay the rent next month, that may be a different experience for that toddler. It's not always, but it can be, right? So, and then we know preschoolers, they really speak in adult-like sentences. They tell and retell stories. They use humor, and they can even engage in group discussions. All right. So yes, I see somebody giving a good resource for literacy, and it's the Dolly Parton library, Imagination Library. Yep, everybody, it's free. You can sign up your children for it, and I believe you get a book that is age appropriate for your child for the first 5 years. Every month, the book will come in the mail. Fantastic resource. That's right. Next slide, please. So we're going to listen to Dr. Sean Clough again talk about serve and return interactions, because we're talking about language and literacy. Hit it.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
You're on mute right now, Verena.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I lost some cool points here. I was just sharing that, that serve and return is so powerful. And I also have another little short video that I believe many of you might have seen. It went viral, of a dad and he's interacting with his baby. And I don't know if he started off for it to last that long, but the baby was so engaged that he continued on, and it went viral. And I believe he's been on a lot of different shows like Ellen, and also keynotes for some child development programs and stuff. So if you will just move me to the next slide, we'll watch that fun video. Pause, please. Pause. Let me see if anybody knows what it is.
Right? Yes.
Has anybody seen this? I know you guys have. Yes. Okay, let's watch it.
We need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it, though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Okay, yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're going to do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh, yeah. Right, don't bring that in. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that, yeah. Yeah. Like, go somewhere else with that, but don't break here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. Then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do it here, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
Oh my. So yeah, I'm seeing the chat blowing up that everybody's loving this video. And it's just so fascinating, you know? It's I can't watch it. Every time I watch it, it makes me smile and it lights me up every single time, right? So yeah, I thought it was fitting to be able to share that video. I thought it made sense to share it there. So thank you guys for your comment on it. Next slide, unless somebody else has anything, we can move to the next slide. I think people were just commenting on it. All right, so let's talk about social emotional domain. This is super duper important, right? So this domain covers relationships with adults, like how kids connect to adults, how they form attachments, how they form attachments, and when they're able to ask for help when they need it, and so on and so forth. So relationships with other children or their peers, there is a way that you have to be able to form those relationships with children and other children and your peers. So emotional functioning, we talked about self-regulation a little bit earlier, and then a sense of identity and belonging. The kids need to be able to gain confidence in who they are and their abilities, right? So for the emotional functioning, that's when you see kids like express their own range of emotions, and they care and concern about the other kids in the classroom. They start to use words to express their emotion, and they're aware of other people's emotion. A lot of times when families are going through stuff, they may think that the kids are not aware, but kids sense, they can read how you're feeling and what your emotions are. And I actually have some research that says that when adults are feeling a high level of stress, that transfers to the children as well. So again, social development refers to children's ability to create and sustain meaningful relationships with adults and others. They develop trusting relationships. I have said that, like, I think over and over, with adults, and are able to be more fully engaged, explore and engage in the world around them. They know that the adults will support them during challenging times. So some critical social skills that are important, again, is learning how to compromise, learning how to cooperate. And as I say those words, we can look at our society today and where we're at in a lot of different arenas. And we have adults, and we were wondering, did we not work on these? Did we not cultivate these as a young child? But then compromise, cooperation, negotiation, taking various perspectives, and sharing are developing at this time for young children. So they do need the support from adults, and they need us to be good role models so they can learn how to develop those skills, right? Again, like I love to think about soft skills and how to tie it into what employers are looking for, being able to have good teamwork, being able to be adaptable, and interpersonal skills, good work ethic, and being able to communicate well, right? So emotional development, we talked about social development, but emotional development refers to children's ability to express, recognize, and manage their own emotions that we talked about when we talked about self-regulation, right? So whether or not they're able to show empathy, and a very young child can already a toddler can already display empathy when a child comes into the classroom and he's sad because his mom dropped him off to go to work and he's feeling sad. You'll see another child will go up to them and kind of hug them or check on them and see if they're okay. These are really massive and very important agendas, developmental agendas that children have to accomplish in order to be successful in school and in life as well. Let me just give you a little bit of an example of just the huge task that a toddler is going through and trying to trying to make sense of all what they're feeling, those big feelings in those little bodies. So we'll say, yeah, you go to Walmart, and then you, your little girl, she saw this absolutely beautiful pink fluffy slippers, and she just had to have them. You know, she threw a fit there because she really wanted them, and so you purchased them. Came home, and then it was raining that day. So when we get home, you know, there are puddles outside, rain. She wants to go out and run in the rain. Guess what she wants to put on her feet? Her pink fluffy slippers. That's what she wants to go out. And then she wants two different things, opposite things at once. And then she falls apart because she doesn't know how to manage those feelings and emotions. So it's our job to help be the buffer for children and to be patient and to understand the various stages of development and what the developmental agenda is and what she's working on to kind of help her get past that or get through that particular stage. Next slide, please. All right, so I just wanted to throw this one up there, and it just gives you some benefits of social emotional learning. Obviously, when kids, you know, when kids are competent social and emotionally development, then you have benefits: improvement in classroom behavior, increased in self-confidence, test scores are higher, so they have good social emotional skills, better attitudes about school, and interacts well with their peers. And obviously that's a plus because it reduces aggressive behavior, emotional distress, and conduct problems. Next slide. All right, so ingredients for high quality learning, early learning experience for children, and then I think we're getting into the impacts of COVID after a couple of slides. We're going to jump right into that. So yes, we need to have healthy and safe environments, like I said before. We need to have responsive and nurturing relationship, which is one of the recurring themes that I had been talking about. Responsive teaching, predictable routines and places. Interest-based learning is one that I want to hit on, and everyday learning opportunities. Using those routines, especially during the pandemic when kids were with families, like how do you use all the waking moments that you have them in your care to kind of promote child development. So and then proper nutrition, there you go again, and healthcare. So I wanted to touch base on the interest-based relationships and the opportunities. So what are your children drawn to? Like if you're a parent or even a teacher in the classroom, you're wondering, and you want to engage them in various ways. You want to be able to, the activities and the things that you do with them, the experiences that you provide for them, are they enjoying them, you know, having pleasure in them, you know, are they motivated to stay engaged in them, you know, you have to take all these things into consideration. What excites the child, what makes him smile, what makes him laugh, what keeps his attention, so that you can actually focus on, you know, interest-based child learning. It can't be something that we decide, you know, as an adult, you know, because the children must be interested in it as well. So responsive and nurturing, we already talked about. Someone who's sensitive, what does that mean? Being sensitive to the needs of the children and being responsive, responding consistently and appropriately to children's cues, right? So it's important that when a baby cries, that they're attended to in an appropriate amount of time, and that they're talked to, you know, give them words to express their feelings, you know, until they're able to say those words themselves. Predictable routines, meal times, using bath time and other routine times as learning opportunity. Someone earlier mentioned that when you would go on a trip to Walmart, you know, just making sure that you're identifying colors and identifying different things while you're at Walmart, and it can, and somebody mentioned, and instead of being on the phone. Tanya just shared a resource here for us to consider, and I want to make sure you guys caught that. It's a TED Talk. Let's see. Oops, I've gone too far in the chat. Hold on one second. All right. So it's a great TED Talk to reinforce what you are sharing. Okay, perfect. I want to take a look at that as well. So thank you for sharing that. So thank you very much. Yes, we'll get to technology. Technology is coming up, Miss Wright. So we'll get to that when we're talking about the impacts of COVID. But yes, so these are some ingredients we need to have high quality experiences for young children. Let's look now at the next slide that talks about child data, and it's specifically for North Carolina. Next slide, please. All right, so I didn't want to do this without just putting a little bit of data out there. And so these key data points for families in North Carolina, it focuses on those areas right here: healthy births, access to care, secure homes and neighborhoods, and then health risk factors. So as you can see over to my right here, that poor and low income, the children in our state is 44.5, almost half of the child population is experiencing poverty or low income. And for food insecurities, 19.3%. Right. So these are benchmarks for COVID, but I believe, so I think it's important to say that because these low income, loss of health coverage, jobs, as well as poverty, these are major factors that are affecting the health and development of young children on a long-term basis. And then these are benchmarks because I think these were already that way even before COVID. So I anticipate that unemployment and all job loss and all this stuff, loss of income, would probably those percentage maybe even higher even now. So children who experience adverse events in their lives before the pandemic occurred, they're especially vulnerable to the consequences of COVID-19. And I as you can imagine, these situations and circumstances present a great deal of stress and trauma on children and families, and again, this does impact their development over time. So I wanted to share a resource here that the North Carolina Child Health Report Card. It's published biannually by the North Carolina Institute of Medicine and the North NC Child. The February 2021 issue of the NC Child Health Report presented they have a special issue that talks about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on North Carolina families. If you are interested in checking that out, you can just Google NC Child Health Report Card February 2021, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to come up with that resource. Next slide, please. We're going to talk a little bit about toxic stress. And, developmental research confirms that early years are critical to the developing of the brain. We already talked about that. Prolonged stressful early life experiences can permanently impact children's brain and biological systems, including the risk of learning disabilities, lifelong health problems, obesity, and heart disease, right? So caregivers' mental and children's mental health, they're linked. Like I said, higher rates of caregiver anxiety, depression, and stress can directly increase young children's emotional distress. I am looking at the time here, and I'm not sure. Okay, let's. I think it's important, so let's play it.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so we'll just briefly, I wanted to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of need and related to child development, early child development. So Abraham Maslow was an academic educator, psychologist, and a scholar. He's most famous for his theory of self-actualization. So really, or theory of motivation, some people call it, right? So I just wanted to present here that according to Maslow, human behavior is based on needs, right? There are 5 types of needs that he's arranged in an order of importance here and priority. So once one set of needs are satisfied, you can be motivated to move to the next set of needs, right? The basic needs is pretty much like these needs need to be met so you can sustain life. It's universal needs, it's biological needs. And so if those are not met, then it's difficult to kind of move to the next level of development. So same thing for children. I think that's the same, and the families that a lot of times that we work with. If the basic need for food, clothing, shelter, is not met, then it's hard to move on to the next level. And sometimes families fluctuate between the first and second level on the pyramid, the bottom levels, where there's, health is an issue, employment, resources, or even family connections. So once these two, right, the basic needs and the step after that is not met, then it becomes difficult to get to the point of self-actualization. And you can see the little pink a pyramid that's been adopted for kids, and same concept. Like if kids are not, in a place where they're taken care of, if they have to deal with any form of abuse or neglect, that's why you have failure to thrive sometimes, because their needs are not being met. And so therefore that they will not be able to, be interested in exploring the environment, taking risks to learn and to play and all these other things, because they are not safe, or their needs are not met, and so it's very important that we make sure that we're considering the basic needs of children and families, and then especially during the context and in the time of COVID, and then trying to figure out how we can help support them from there. Someone said earlier it takes a village, and that's true. It does take a village. And so I felt like that was interesting to point it out, and I wanted to add it to before we start talking about the impacts of COVID-19 on child development. Next slide, please. Next. All right, so some of the research that I was able to find, I guess research is still happening because the pandemic is not over yet. So we'll have more information, as time goes by. But I was able to find some, and some of the ones that I wanted to focus on is children develop worry and fear, anxiety, about the future, and the effects on learning, early learning, health concerns, potential behavioral changes, and overuse of screen time and the internet, which I know Miss Marsha had commented a couple of times in the chat room about that. So we're getting ready to dive a little bit into that. Next slide, please. So I'm the worry and fear about the future, and I'm focusing on early childhood, but you can think about that for school age children and even young adults as well, what that could mean for them. One of the first questions we receive from parents is, how do I talk to my child about COVID-19? Like, how I can't wrap my brain around it myself. So how am I expected to explain this to my child? And so we had to put together resource packets from places like 0 to 3 and Head Start, the learning centers, and other entities, NACI, to help to have the conversation with young children. So one of the things that we also ask parents to do is limit the media time. Like there was a period of time where this was all you can hear on the news, and it was just hiding people's anxiety even more, and young children were not exceptions. They could hear it, and it did have an impact on them. So we gave resources like how to address anxiety and stress in children, and I also have some links for you on resilience that I want to share with you, and also some resources for where you could go to get some of these answers to the questions, because we obviously don't have enough time to work through that. Parents had questions about virtual, and children had anxiety about virtual school and the whole lack of socialization. That was an issue. And some children who were very athletic and they were very involved in all sports, they really, really had a difficult time with that as well. How to manage daily life at home during quarantine and social distancing. Some kids, it was hard. They were used to their routine. They liked their routine of going to school or preschool, and doing different things. And now they have to be at home on lockdown 24/7, so that created stress for them and anxiety. Also dealing with loss and grief. That's something else that, I had to become educated about so that we can help also make referrals for mental health for young children, infantile mental health around some of the loss that they experienced during this COVID-19 time. All right, so next slide. So loss of skills. So as you know, a lot of kids, even in early Head Start and Head Start, they did not get the opportunity to exercise those, skills, or build on those skills, or develop mastery towards those skills because, of the, quarantine and all that. But Head Start did take steps, and we just redesigned services where children still had access to activities, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, and families still had the support that they needed to be able to work on activities and experiences with children to help them build and maintain skills. But for my kids, my little boy, he definitely regressed a lot in math, and so he started the school year this year in a lower math for place. So we've been working really, really hard to work on math. He made gains in reading, because one of the things that I did a lot was, okay, let's do some reading. And he was into chapter books. He just started reading chapter books. So I was like, okay, let's get into that. So he made gains on reading, but he lost some learning in math. And so that way he's really trying to pick up right now, so that by the second 9 weeks of school, he'll be on grade level for his math. So I imagine that happened for a lot of children across the board. Even when you think about children with special needs, that's a lot of loss, and they have to work again. But children are resilient, families are resilient, so the skills will be regained eventually. Inadequate learning a lot of times, and even the setting. My kids were doing virtual school, and they had to sit at the computer from after one session to the next, to the next, to the next, and they were sitting at the computer watching the screen for a long period of time, when we know that they really need to exercise. So limited exercise, there are brain benefits to exercise. It improves your memory, you're in a better mood, it lengthens your attention span, boosts decision-making skills, and prompts growth of new nerve cells and blood vessels. And for us who's a little bit older, it helps with our blood pressure and our waistline. So it was very important. I just saw that that lack of movement, and that they had to sit at the computer for long periods of time. I saw that as a challenge. Digital access, a lot of parents did not have access to the internet or even computers. We had to do a lot of work around working with community members to help furnish some laptops for young children, school-age children whose parents maybe had to let them use their phone to do their work because they didn't have laptops. Internet was spotty, so folks needed better internet. So we just saw a lot of different systems that needed to be upgraded, and so challenges that families face that they needed to resolve in order to help. So we already know the learning gap that already existed prior to COVID-19 just pretty much widened even more within the socioeconomic groups that they were. So it's and specifically I'm speaking Black, Latinx, and also single families, single parent families. So any questions, comments? I think I saw a comment in the chat. Let me just look at it briefly. Old school rapping background. Bring to his health. Okay. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. We're running out of time. I want to try to get through these. So health issues. So one of the major consequences of the lockdown we already talked about was kids were not able to engage in outdoor physical activities. They didn't have access to outdoor spaces, which could increase weight problems for a lot of kids. And kids really need at least 1 hour a day of outdoor time, right? They really do need at least 1 hour of moderate to vigorous outdoor, moderate to vigorous physical activity, whether it's indoor or outdoor. They just need that. But for the vitamin D, the outdoor is important. So locomotor, like physical activities, things people could do even when they couldn't, go to school, go for a walk, movement games, dancing, marching around, making obstacle courses, even in small apartments, you can do that. And then there are non-local motor skills that kids need that could be achieved during those times, like stretching, flexing, bending, wiggling, swaying. So these are also things that could have been, that's what we shared with our families, some of those type of activities to do with children. Again, here we go with the good nutrition. It also plays a critical role in children's cognitive development and academic performance. And this is a concern during the pandemic because of the lack of vitamin D, which is essential for bone and teeth development. So it's important. The impact of nutritional deficiency is mostly seen in poor social economic groups and school closures. That means like millions of children, they didn't have the benefit of the food programs provided by the schools. So the community had to step up in a lot of ways to try to help with that food insecurity. So I wanted to talk the delay in child health checks. COVID-19 definitely, the impact on health was significant, really. Families didn't have access to preventative care, during the pandemic. So again, I'm speaking specifically lower income, Black, Latinx households. And again, according to a resource, Rapid EC data, 37.8% of families sampled had missed at least one well baby check visit since the start of the pandemic. So the hope, though, is that it's better now, and that kids are getting in to see the doctor for the well baby and well child checks. During the well baby checks, it's an important time for the physicians because they get to do a few things. They screen for early issues in development. They also screen the parent-child or caregiver child for mental health. They look at physical safety, and they also look at the parent-child relationship. Young children, they receive their vaccinations against deadly childhood illnesses during those visits as well. So it was critical time, and this is time lost that kids were not able to get their well baby checks and other type of appointments or examinations done. Next slide, please. All right, so look at my little guy right here. Potential behavioral changes. I know some adults who have behavioral changes, so definitely I expect that the kids would have behavioral changes. So isolation, physical distance, and loneliness really are challenging situations for anybody, any human being to deal with. So when children, they're bound to miss interacting with their friends or their peer groups, and just not being able to do what they typically do over a long period of time can definitely drastically change their behaviors. So caregivers reported an immediate increase in emotional distress at the beginning of the pandemic, again, which coincided with an increase in child emotional distress and behavioral problems. So, yeah, overall, again, child and caregiver mental health has improved since the pandemic, according to the research that's being done now, but the trend is not present in certain subgroups. Again, caregiver stress and child behavior problems have remained, especially in the lower income households, again, Black and Latinx households, as well as single parents households. It's important that we serve as a buffer against distress so that children can develop strong social emotional skills. So again, although the pandemic is it's not over, but we still have families that are struggling, that need help, and they need resources to be able to kind of like get to that self-actualization piece of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Next slide, please. All right, so screen time. So overuse of screen time and the internet. And I actually put this up there because, I had to actually show my kids this. And I said, this is what the research says. And they're looking at me like, are you kidding me? Because the children just pretty much wanted to go from screen time, looking at the computer all day, for virtual school, and then they wanted to go to the tablet, and then when I asked for a break from the tablet, they wanted to watch TV, and then it was just from one screen time experience to the next, to the next, to the next, until we had to develop a schedule to do that. But it was challenging. It was very challenging because at the same time you're doing homeschooling, you're also supposed to be doing your regular work, right? Because the employers still expect the outcomes. So, and we'll talk about the impact on parents in just, a couple of minutes. But yeah, this right here talks about how much screen time that a young child, basically birth to 2, they shouldn't have any screen time. And then it talks about 2 and over and how screen time should be used. Limited to an hour per day, high quality programming, and viewed with an adult who can help them apply what they are learning to the real world around them. So I'm just going to leave that right there and then move to the next slide, please. So some challenges for families, right? So COVID-19 placed great demand on parents. So first, families had to establish new routines for work, education, and caregiving, and that includes me trying to figure out how all this stuff was going to work. It left parents with no time for self-care, which we know that self-care is critically important. We have to be able to take care of ourselves in order to be taking care of other people, including our kids. So, and then potential impacts, the responsive parenting and positive parent-child relationship. I mean, I had one parent who just said, can you please come get my kid, because I just can't deal with it right about now. So we were just making sure that we provided, we were checking in with families like weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and making sure that they had the necessary supports to navigate this, or mediate some of the risk, really, that was going on in the household due to the level of stress that the parents were under. So it potentially impact their way of relating to their children, because you have additional stresses, even for families who were not dealing with unemployment before or whatnot. Now that becomes a stressor because they found themselves unemployed. Housing concerns, not being able to pay rent on time or at all. So a lot of families were faced with some of those type of dire situations. Also, disrupted family support systems and connections because of the quarantine, and you kind of like only had to be with people that you breathe the same air with for a while there, and so that really kind of disconnected people in a lot of ways. And then disrupted the normal bereavement process for families. So when families experience loss, they couldn't go and do a proper goodbye, or however they do it in the culture or whatever, for their of their loved ones. So that was a difficult process for a lot of people, including myself. So just these are some really, really difficult challenges that were brought on for parents and families due to the pandemic. All right. So there's another resource someone shared about related to media and technology. All right. So thanks for sharing those resources. Keep them coming. Next slide, please. We're going to transition. Resilient children are made, not born. And that's that by Dr. Bruce Perry. I don't know if you know who he is, but you want to check out Dr. Perry's latest publication with Oprah. It's called What Happened to You. It's on the New York bestsellers list. It's a conversation on trauma, resilience, and healing. So in cases of trauma, as everybody on the call, I'm sure you probably know by now, you need to be asking what happened to you versus what is wrong with you. And then, so again, I've said all this stuff, but I want us to focus on the fact that families continue to demonstrate resiliency through this difficult time. And so we have programs like Head Start, Early Head Start, other community-wide support systems that can help children and families develop coping strategies and other important protective factors to help mediate risk and increase the health and well-being of children and families. Next slide, please. So this is a resource that I have for you on articles and ebooks, very convenient, and also videos that you can watch just about resilience and how to help children and teens manage stress and inside resilient children, how to build resilience in children, strategies to strengthen your kids. So there's no way we can go through those, but I just wanted you to have that resource for future reading. Next slide, please. So I just want to share real briefly about Office of Head Start and how they supported programs, children and families, throughout the nation during the pandemic. During the start of the pandemic, nobody really knew what to do. And, I'm talking about childcare, NC Pre-K, like all these different entities there is out there for early learning systems. And Office of Head Start stepped right on up. They offered additional funding and flexibilities to utilize COVID-19 funds to support children, families, staff, programs, making sure we had the protective equipment that we needed. They made sure that they allowed us to redesign services to accommodate the needs of children, families, and staff. And they held ongoing webinars and conversations with Head Start local leaders to help us through this period of uncertainty. I felt like it was I don't even know. It was so wonderful to see how Office of Head Start stepped in right away during this uncertain times to help support us on the local level. So next slide, please. So I'm going to just briefly mention some of the supports that we had to do. In education, we offered hybrid instruction to include some of these. So for the children who have special needs, we know that all children, predictability and regularity is important, but we started off providing services for children with special needs on an everyday basis, and then virtual instructions for children and families. And then we had at one period of time where Mondays and Tuesdays one set of children would come, and then Wednesdays and Thursdays another set, and Friday would be for sanitation, closed for sanitation and other things like that. So address barriers such as internet connectivity and access to technology. If families have those type of barriers, we try to remove them for them and make sure that they had what the devices and the whatever they needed to be able to connect. Staggered in-person instruction for children, I mentioned that. Provided instructional packages to parents with age-appropriate learning materials so that they can interact with their children and they can work on skill progression versus regression with their children. But parents had challenges. Sometimes parents had 2 or 3 young children, and they had school-age children, and they had to be helping all the children. So sometimes it was really, really challenging. But we did support families with education supports. Next slide, please. Health and nutrition support. Some of the things we did: collaborated with families and pediatric offices to address the follow-ups on children's health and medical needs, offered nutritious meals and things like diapers and wipes to children and families, provided information about community resources such as food pantries, WIC, and locations for food distribution sites. Next slide, please. Mental health supports. They included, we offered mental health to staff, not just only the families, but the staff. Collaborated with other mental health agencies and community agencies to help children and families. Who provided on-site medical health services for families who were comfortable coming on-site. Some preferred teleconferences or virtual sessions, and we also did some referrals to outside resources. So we worked with Crisis Intervention, Child Development Service Agency, which is the CDSA, local schools, therapists, and medical providers, and then obviously the health advisory team met to explore challenges and possible solutions to help families during this difficult time. Next, please. All right, so family supports. So we make sure, again, one of the things that families, they felt disconnected, they felt alone, isolated. So we provided weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly check-ins via phone calls and on Zoom and other type of platforms to connect with families. We discussed child and family well-being at each conversation. We assessed the needs of children and families to make sure what they needed. Did they need food? Did they need mental health services? What it is that they need, what kind of resource that they needed. I worked with the community to try to figure out what those resources were. Help families focus on steps to accomplish goals, and we provided various platforms to conduct parent meetings, trainings, and networking opportunities. Next slide, please. And this is a resource slide that I wanted you to have. Please take a snapshot of it or whatever you prefer to do to help you when you need any information about child development or learning about children. These are the places that you should go to access some information, whether it's about the COVID-19 or whether it's about anything else child related, child development wise. So I wanted to make sure that I got that to you. And my very last slide is basically just a resource slide and my contact information. Questions we've been answering and talking all along, and we're out of time. Really, we have like 1 minute. I'm showing that we have, and then the last slide, it just shows my contact information. So I thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, for hanging in there with us on the call. And I'm just grateful. It was a lot of information. I try to give it all to you, and I hope it was helpful. So thank you for having me.